Hi, this is my review of the Hackmaster Player's Handbook. Hackmaster is a fantasy role-playing game, and it feels kind of like a psychedelic journey because the game handles a lot of contradictions in a very cool way. The game has a lot of old school elements, but at the same time it has a lot of innovations within those elements. The game at times feels like a joke, and it's constantly making fun of itself and of other fantasy role-playing games, but this is actually a very serious game, so it's quite interesting. Well, let me talk about the quality of the PDF. I highly recommend that you get the physical book because it looks beautiful. However, I will be reviewing the PDF version. Well, the PDF has great organization, and you have a virtual table of contents, and you have a mini table of contents within each chapter, so it's pretty easy to navigate the entire thing. And the illustrations are great, they have that old school flavor to them. You have an index and an errata already integrated into the book. However, you really need to understand that the writing style of the book is very comedic, very tongue-in-cheek, as if a snobby friend was telling you how to play the game. So you're going to be reading things like, oh, remember all those fantasy role-playing games that you used to play, that they are inferior, oh, but rejoice because now you have the greatest fantasy role-playing game in your hand, and so you're going to get a lot of jokes like that. There's even a small area in the book where you're supposed to gather different signatures from game designers and lucky people, so you can rub your dice on that area, and you get higher or lower rolls as you need them. So it's all very funny. However, if you don't understand this comedic tone, you're not going to enjoy this book, and you're going to get confused about many things. Okay, now let's get into the contents of the PDF. Well, character creation is quite interesting as well. There are many things that are interesting in this game because it rewards you for working within certain limits. So at the start you get building points, and those building points will be used to customize almost every aspect of your character. So for example, if you start rolling your ability scores, you may decide to swap or change those scores, but if you decide to keep those scores as you roll them, you will receive building points, so you can spend them to customize your character. So sometimes it's really cool to just get the results that you rolled, and even if your character feels like really weak at first, because of the building points, and that character will have chance to improve his stats and skills and everything else. And that's something that I really like about the character development. As your character levels up, your ability scores level up as well. Not exactly, you see, you get a percentage with each ability score, and through the use of building points, you're going to be able to raise that percentage, and once you hit 100, your ability score will go up. So this game has a higher chance of improving your character stats overall. Oh, I forgot to mention that there is charisma and there is looks. So they're handled as two separate attributes, because somebody could be handsome but at the same time, I don't know, have a very sucky personality, or you could have a very charming, very unique personality, but at the same time you may be quite ugly. So that's the difference between looks and charisma in this game. Now then you choose a race, and races in this game at first seem pretty standard. You have the classical fantasy races of dwarves, elves, humans, halflings. However, there are some interesting twists to those classical races. For example, the half-elf. Your half-elf is going to have different options and background depending on whether that half-elf was raised by elves or by humans. You also get some pretty interesting character races. For example, you have the Gnome Titan, and the Gnome Titan is kind of like a gnome bred for war, very tough and strong. And then you have the Grell, and the Grell is kind of like a very savage version of the elf. And you even have the half Hobgoblin. Usually just get half orc, but here you also get a half Hobgoblin. And then after choosing your race, you're going to have to choose a character class. or rather purchase a character class, because you need to use your building points to purchase a class, and that class may be cheaper or more expensive depending on your character race. There are also some classes that are restricted to a specific race, so you have to work within that limit. You also choose your alignment. You have the standard alignment system of lawful good, chaotic evil, etc. But you also have honor and fame. Now, honor is basically how respected your character is, how much NPCs respect that character, and it has to do with your alignment. Maybe if you have lawful good, you have to role play as a lawful good character, or maybe if you're neutral evil, you have to role play like that. So regardless of what your character, or how infamous or I don't know, benevolent your character seems, people will respect you. So if you're playing as an assassin that kills everyone who crosses him, they may respect, oh, watch out, there's an assassin over there who's going to kill you if you insult him or whatever. So that's honor in that sense. However, you also get fame, and fame has to do more with how well known your character is throughout the world. So you have to keep in mind those scores when you interact with NPCs. There's also a group honor, because people are going to judge you based on who you hang out with. And there are also oaths that you can break, and if you break an oath, you may receive a penalty to your honor. And honor is basically, at first, it's like a sum of all your ability scores. And this becomes like an honor pool, or a number of honor points that you may spend to modify your rolls, attack rolls, or skill rolls and such. So that's pretty cool. You're also going to of course define some details regarding your character's background, such as age, weight, height, also left-handedness or right-handedness. But there are also quirks and flaws. And quirks are kind of like mental traits and like habits or prejudices that basically give your character penalties and in different situations, and more chances to roleplay that character as an imperfect being. But because you take those quirks, you're going to receive building points. And flaws are basically physical defects. You can even choose, if you want your character to be blind, you can choose to be blind, and you're going to get a lot of building points because of it as a trade-off. And it's actually, well, you're going to be pretty lame at certain situations if you're blind, but because you have a great sense of hearing, you will be very useful in other situations. And because of the way combat works in this game, you're not entirely useless. That maybe the enemy will get a very low defense roll, and you'll be able to hit that enemy even if you're blind. So there are many interesting quirks and flaws. Let me read you a few of them, because they're quite interesting. Now, when it comes to quirks, you have fear of heights, foul-mouthed, glutton, gullible, nosy, obnoxious, tone-deaf, etc. And, oh, sorry, tone-deaf is a flaw. Let me talk about the flaws. Maybe you're blind, or you're epileptic, or maybe you're really hairy, or maybe you have a lisp, maybe you're pestilent, and so on. Those are the kind of quirks and flaws that you're going to get in this game. Now, you also get to purchase skills, talents, and proficiencies. And there may be some confusion between these elements. Let me talk about each one of them. First, you have proficiencies, and this is basically what your character knows. Your character knows how to do something with an object, or maybe it could be a racial or cultural thing. So, for example, if you want to have a very high ability using a specific weapon, you need proficiency with that weapon. But not all the weapons are handled in the same way. So, for example, there are weapons that fit into the minimal skill weapon category, such as clubs. So it's very easy to use a club. You just swing your club and try to hit someone in the face or whatever, and that's because it's a very simple weapon. If you don't have a minimal skill weapon proficiency, your penalties for using the weapon are going to be almost non-existent. You're going to be very useful in combat. But there are some weapons that are quite complex, and you need to get proficiency with that weapon. There are also some cultural proficiencies, and I think these are really cool. For example, we have the groin stomp. which is a proficiency of the gnome titan. Basically, when a gnome titan maybe pushes someone into the ground, that enemy is prone, the gnome titan will get close and start stomping the groin of the enemy, so it's quite funny. You also get other things such as Angawa Battle Cry, a bone-chilling war cry. It's a signature exclamation of the Grail, so this of the Grail, and they all have different effects in gameplay and in role-playing as well. You also have the Glare Sea, which is basically a means to communicate all those trail markings. Maybe you want to indicate that you went south, on that there's an ambush point ahead. You can mark all that with specific runes and blazings. So it's actually quite cool. Now, let's talk about talents. Talents feel a lot like feats in other games. The talents are basically extraordinary abilities or that feel kind of like powers that will allow your character to be very effective during certain situations. For example, maybe you have a higher attack bonus, or you know how to blind fight, or maybe you can be a deceptive defender. You have improved reach with your weapon, or maybe you can have a bonus when you parry attacks. There are also miscellaneous talents. Not all of them have to do with combat. You also maybe you age gracefully, so you're going to be looking pretty young as you get older. Maybe you're a fast healer, or maybe you have a forgettable face. This is perfect for an assassin or a thief or a rogue. Let me talk about raid classes a bit more, because there are some things that should be clarified. You have the fighter, but there are also subclasses for that character class. The fighter may end up being a knight or a paladin. The knight and paladin both have different standards and codes they need to follow, but at the same time they have some bonuses, especially when they deal with different NPCs. You also have the ranger and the barbarian, and the thief and the rogue are actually different characters. The thief feels more like a thief, and the rogue feels more like a bard, in my opinion. And you also have the assassin and the mage. The cleric is actually quite complex in this game, at least when it comes to flavor. Maybe complex is not the right word. It's very deep. You have all these different fates and temples to choose from, and you get different powers from different fates, and it feels very thematic. Maybe a bit even more thematic than, for example, in Pathfinder. This feels more like integrated into the story of the game. Now, when it comes to multi-class characters, you have three options. You have the fighter mage, the fighter thief, and the mage thief, and they all work pretty well. Those combos are pretty popular, in my opinion, when it comes to fantasy gaming. Now, let's talk about skills. And skills are probably what you are thinking they are right now. They are basically focused tasks in which your character gets better and better as the character spends building points. However, these skills are very specialized. These are very focused, so you're going to get some skills that seem pretty, I don't know, general, such as maybe animal empathy. But there's also animal herding and animal husbandry. You're also gonna get a lot more specific. So, for example, you have the fire building, or the gleaning formation skill, or mathematics skill, the monster lore. You have a huge list of skills, so your character is going to become very focused on specific tasks, and depending on the building points that you use to level up your character and to build it. Now let's talk about the goods, services, and equipment. You have a very large, very good list of goods, services, and equipment, and they really save some space by just describing the most complex ones, and that's very cool, because sometimes you're looking through many paragraphs and you want, I don't know, not to read unnecessary things, and everything is very well organized here. And now let's talk about combat. The combat system in Hackmaster feels very active, and it also feels very detailed and situational. If you're used to a system where you roll initiative and you take turns, Hackmaster is not like that. In Hackmaster, you will roll initiative. However, this determines the number of seconds you will take doing a specific action. So, for example, Let's say you roll initiative, you find a group of skeletons, and you both roll initiative, and it turns out that the skeletons act in second 3 and you act in second 5. So the game master is going to be like 1, 2, 3, the skeletons act, and those skeletons may choose to, I don't know, maybe they decide to move again, towards your character, or maybe the skeletons have ranged weapons and they're going to attack your character from that distance, and that takes a number of seconds. And when it's your turn, you have to decide what you're going to do. If you decide to, let's say, jog a certain distance, that's going to take a number of seconds. If you decide to wield a weapon against an enemy, that weapon, depending on how heavy that weapon is or how complex, it's going to take a number of seconds. So, for example, if you are using knives or short swords, you will be able to attack more often than with a larger, stronger weapon. However, because of the armor protection in this game, you have to consider that as well, because armor in this game actually makes you easier to hit. They're going to hit you a lot more, but because you have armor, you're going to get protect. You're going to get damage reduction. So you really have to take that into consideration, and everything feels pretty logical. And of course, you have different combat maneuvers. Maybe you just want to jab your enemy, and jabbing with a weapon actually takes a lot less seconds than if you swing the weapon as normal. So you have to consider that. You can also hold the enemy at bay, you can perform aggressive attacks, charge, you can perform a full parry or flee. And there are a lot of rules to deal with momentum, multiple opponents and re-attacks, knockbacks, cult shots, fatigue. You will get tired when you use spells and attacks. There is a chance that your character will get tired. And there are a lot of modifiers and situational ways in which your maneuvers and attacks will change. So for example, maybe you just don't hit an enemy, you hit an enemy really hard, you're going to knock back that enemy, and maybe you want to perform a coup de grace upon a fallen foe. The thief is going to get an advantage when doing this. And there are many fighting styles where maybe you want to fight with a weapon and shield, or two-handed weapon, one-handed weapon only, a shield only. You may even choose to use two shields for those desperate moments when you just want to protect yourself. And each fighting style has its own advantages and disadvantages. I forgot to mention, in this game you have what is called a penetrating dice or penetration dice. And this is basically exploding dice in other games. That means that if you roll the maximum value on a specific dice, let's say you roll an 8-sided die and you roll an 8, you get to roll that die again and -1 to the value. So that's pretty cool. You're going to get some pretty surprising results. And when you attack or you get attacked, the target of the attack is going to get a defense roll. And this defense roll may actually result in counter attacks. So even if you're waiting, oh no, I just used my two-handed sword and I have to wait a few seconds before using it again because I'm pulling it back, you will get a chance to finish off your opponent if you do really well in your defense roll. There are also fumbles and critical hits, and at first I thought that these were just a joke, because when you score a critical hit, you have to roll basically a D10,000. That is a 10,000 sided die. So and then you have to check with your game master. And I thought it was a joke, but after checking the game master guide for this game, it's true. There's actually a table for the D10,000. So that's incredible. No, and combat in this game is just pretty beautiful. It feels like an engine that runs by itself, man. It just feels very automatic, and once it clicks in, it feels very, very natural. At first you're going to be looking at some tables as in, oh no, what are your character sheet all the time, how many seconds does it take for me to run over there and attack my enemy, but then it's going to be very intuitive. And this is kind of like an economy of game mechanics, because you don't have to deal with all those oh, you get 3 attacks this turn and you get 2 attacks the other turn, because everything feels like very, I don't know, very active, very real. However, I think that you should familiarize yourself with at least the movement distance before running a combat, because that way you won't be looking at the tables all the time. But combat is really amazing. I think this is the most innovative combat system I've seen in a fantasy role-playing game. It's really good. Now let's talk about money and treasure. Money and treasure in this game is handled very well, because you get haggling and bartering systems that feel a lot more structured than other games. And there are also artifacts and relics and cursed items. However, those will not appear in this book. You need to buy the Game Master, the Hackmaster guide for that. And then when it comes to experience and training, it's relatively easy to level up at the lower levels, but when you get higher and higher in levels of power, you will need specialized training. You could train on your own without hiring an NPC, but it has some disadvantages. And NPCs, there are different types of them beyond what you are accustomed to. You have hirelings, of course, but you also have followers and cronies. Cronies aren't that helpful, just a bit helpful. You also have henchmen and sidekicks, but there are also hangers-on, which are basically like very lame groupies of sorts. They're kind of like following you around and pretending like they're your followers, but they're just like opportunistic people who want to take advantage of the situation. You also have a mentor. You could be a mentor and you have your own protege. So you start guiding and helping an NPC as he develops, or as a fighter or whatever. And this is kind of like an insurance for when your character gets killed, you can play as your protege. So that's pretty cool. And you have obligations concerning your relationship with these NPCs. There are other miscellaneous rules in the book, such as illumination, low light vision, movement in complete darkness, falling damage, other hazards, etc. And the mage spells and clerical spells, you have a pretty large list, and it's very easy to understand, and they really packed a lot of power when it comes to the spell lists. And from the clerics list, you have spells such as alert, antitoxin. You have a lot of cure wound spells. You have cure trifling wound, cure trivial wound, cure minor wound, cure small wound, cure light wound, cure lesser wound. As I was telling you, it's kind of like a big joke sometimes. Cure middling wound. There are many more. And you have other spells such as gale force wind, hail to fire, hallowed weapon. And when it comes to mage spells, these are some of the spells that you will get in the book. Let me find them. They're over here. Here we go. You have some pretty classic spells such as charm, chilling touch. You also have ice knife, rope charm. You have fracture object, shadow skin, cutaneous respiration, bash face, hasten, preemptive retribution, ghost form, mist of coralling, jumping juju. Some of the names are quite funny. And at the end of the book, you have a very cool appendix, and it has to do with pixie fairies. If you want to play as a pixie fairy, you have all the information to play as one right here. So finally, you will be able to feel what it's like to play as a pixie fairy, a fighter pixie fairy or cleric. So it's actually quite funny. Well, let me tell you what I think about this game, specifically this player's handbook. I think this system is amazing. It's very crunchy, and that's true. It's crunchy and it feels very old school and tactical. I think those players that like miniatures gameplay and war gaming and all that are going to love this book. You could play it using, because a lot of the rules are just advanced rules. You don't need to add them to your game if you don't want to. You could play it as a very simple game and maybe make some concessions to play without miniatures, but it's not going to feel the same in my opinion. It's just everything in this game when it comes to playing on a tabletop feels so cool. You need to try the combat system. It feels great, and it's going to be very different from anything else that you have played. I really can't find a strong negative point to this game. Just for somebody who wants a really rules light game, and maybe he won't enjoy the amount of modifiers and situations, but for those of you that want detail, that want to savor each moment in combat, you're going to enjoy the battle system, and you're going to enjoy all the options you get to build your character. I highly recommend that you get this player's handbook, and in about a week I will review the Game Master guide for Hackmaster. You should get this book. If you think you have seen everything there is to be seen of a fantasy role-playing game, think again, because this game, Hackmaster, is amazing. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.